I stayed home to I stayed home to work remotely, and we really didn't have much of a blizzard here, but here we go anyway. And I'm not sure why I'm quite so blurry, but we'll just soldier on. You don't need to look at me anyway. So today we're talking with Alexa Shapiro, who's the director, I believe is the correct title, for the Minnesota Driftless Hiking Trail. It was brought up at one of our meetings a while ago that this is a really interesting program. We'd really like to learn more on how it started, how it's moving forward, and what the future is. And we do have a small group today, but the good news is we have it recorded, so we'll hopefully reach a lot more throughout the next few weeks. Between weather and busy days, sometimes that happens for our forums. So please welcome Alexa.
Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for having me with you today. I'm very excited to share more with you about this project that's happening down in the southeastern corner of our state. Before I get started, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Let me just find it. All right, there we go. Everyone can see me okay, or see the presentation okay? Great. All right. So as Mary Jo said, my name is Alexa Shapiro. I am the trail director with the Minnesota Driftless Hiking Trail, and I am really excited to be here with all of you to share more about this project and kind of update you all on what we've been working towards for the last couple of years. Before I get started, I do want to give a thank you to the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. We received some pretty substantial funding last year from the ENRTF that's really helping move us forward in our project. And I'll share more later on in the presentation about what that funding means for us. But first, a little bit about me. So I've been backpacking in the Midwest for about 10 years now. I got my start on Missouri's Ozarks Trail and then left the Midwest to hike the Pacific Crest Trail in 2017, followed by a solo hike of the Superior Hiking Trail in 2018. And when I can't get 5 months off at a time to do a long distance hike, which is most of the time, I am hiking on all of the state, local, and county trails that we have down here in the Driftless region of Minnesota. I first got connected with MDHT in 2022 while I was working as the executive director for a nonprofit in Winona called the Winona Outdoor Collaborative. That organization works to strengthen the outdoor community. And at the time, Marty Walsh, who's the founder of MDHT, had reached out to see about the potential of getting some of our community members and our volunteers out into the trail corridor to help with volunteer projects and raising awareness about the trail project as well. And as somebody who really loves backpacking and getting outside, I was really thrilled to hear about this project and to know that down the line there might be a backpacking trail just a stone's throw from my home. So I immediately became very involved with the organization as a volunteer, advocating to folks locally about the trail and just helping to raise awareness about the project as well, which made it even more exciting for me in 2014 when the opportunity to work with the organization became available too. I've been working in outdoor recreation since about 2014. I got my start with an AmeriCorps program called National Civilian Community Corps, which is really similar to FDR's CCC program back in the 30s. In that role, I was doing a lot of physical labor, including trail building and maintenance, some conservation and restoration projects, and even a small stint as a wildland firefighter and emergency medical responder. And all of that experience really informed my interest and my passion for working outside. So after I graduated from that program, I went on to work for a Parks and Recreation department, bringing volunteers out into the parks and the trail systems to do maintenance and restoration projects as well. And ever since then, I've been working in the nonprofit world, getting to know a lot of the behind the scenes work that happens to lead projects forward. So the fundraising and grant writing, as well as strategic development, working with boards of directors, managing and coordinating programs and volunteers, you name it. And then in 2019, I helped co-found the Winona Outdoor Collaborative. And since then, I've been working in sort of the nonprofit startup realm, really supporting organizations in their early stages to building that structure and policies and procedures that will allow them to have longevity and some sustainability into their future. And I think that really appealed to the board with MDHT. And so that's been a huge part of the work that I've been doing over the last 5 months that I've been with the organization, is building out that structure so that the trail agency can last for generations to come. Okay, now about the actual project. So our vision is a 100-plus-mile backpacking trail across the driftless area of Minnesota in the style of the National Scenic and Recreational Trails, supported by volunteers and operating as an independent organization. Now, I wanted to just break this statement down a little bit further to really help us envision what we're trying to do. So when we say 100 plus, we're really looking to be the new long distance trail in our area. When we say long distance, we mean 25 miles or more of a continuous footpath. And currently, where we are located, that's just not a resource that we have available to us. I am located in the Winona area, and I am about 2.5 to 3 hours away from my closest long distance trail. So we knew when we started out that we wanted to be able to provide something that doesn't exist in this region to really help serve a different recreational user group that doesn't have access to that form of recreation here in our community, which then informed our focus on backpacking specifically. But also, backpacking is a really low service area when you compare it to other forms of recreation like mountain biking or equestrian trails or even motorized trails. And so that was sort of a focus of ours, was helping serve that user group and also knowing that the maintenance and the upkeep for that will be very different and a lot more minimal than other user groups that we see in this region too. Now, I'm not sure where folks are located today on the call, and there may be some familiarity with the Driftless area, but I just wanted to quickly give a little description there. So the region that we're in southeastern Minnesota is known as the Driftless area, and the Driftless area does extend into Illinois, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota, and we are on the northern end and are often told by the 3 other states that we're not technically the Driftless area. But if any of you have come down into Winona County, Houston, or Fillmore counties, I'm sure you have seen and heard the deep passion that people who live in this area have for the Driftless. Essentially, this area was missed during the last period of glaciation, which has led to the topography that we have here. So if you're driving down into the region, you'll usually notice the deep river valleys and these towering bluffs and these beautiful prairies. And that was something that we really wanted to feature in our trail. When we look at other large trails in Minnesota, especially the Superior Hiking Trail or the North Country Trail, they do such a phenomenal job of highlighting the unique topography and landscape that they have up there in northern Minnesota. And that was something that we felt needed to happen down here too. The Driftless area is a really beautiful landscape, and we really wanted to invite people to move slowly through that landscape so that they could come to know and love and want to protect the region too. Now, when I say National Scenic and Recreational Trails, this is really to help us envision what types of trails we're trying to emulate. We want people to be thinking about the Superior Hiking Trail, the Ice Age Trail, the North Country Trail, when they're starting to envision what we are trying to build as well. And then independent organization, we are often asked if we are with the state. And so we just like to make it really clear, we are actually a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're a nonprofit working privately with willing landowners to establish public access. So this project is not a state intervention. We're not with the DNR. And actually up until last fall when I was hired, the organization was an entirely volunteer-led effort, and it's still really deeply grassroots and volunteer supported. In the last couple of years, we've also received some pretty substantial support from a number of different folks across our area. It started with Eagle Bluff Environmental Learning Center based out of Lanesboro, Minnesota. We secured them as our fiscal agent last year, which helped us receive the funding from the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund. But because of the Eagle Bluff is really well known in our region for the work that they do, and they have a lot of respect in the community. And so it also really helped legitimize us as an organization in the eyes of the rural communities that our trail corridor passes through. We've also been working closely with the University of Minnesota Extension through a program that they have called the Empowering Small Minnesota Communities Grant Program. And through that grant, we've been able to, essentially, they have been supporting us by providing expertise in areas that we don't have on our team. And I'll share more about what that exact work has looked like in the last year later on in my presentation too. Now, at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen here, you'll see the Lost Creek Hiking Trail. If anybody's been to Chatfield, Minnesota, you might have heard or seen the Lost Creek Hiking Trail. That trail is 6.5 miles long and crosses both private and public local land. And so when we started our efforts, that organization was a huge support system of ours, really helping inform us on the process that they took to create buy-in from landowners to sign on to the project and what the process really was for them. And we're in talks right now of further partnerships, including the potential of designating the Lost Creek Hiking Trail as the start of the Minnesota Driftless Hiking Trail. And then we've also received a lot of support from cities and local government chambers. And our next steps are really formalizing those relationships. So I wanted to provide a brief timeline of this project. So back in 2018, I mentioned Marty Walsh. He's the founder of the organization. He was working for Fillmore County Economic Development, identifying a demand for more hiking in our communities, as well as just looking more broadly at the recreational landscape that we have down here in Fillmore County. In 2019, based off of that research and off of the outreach that he had been doing, he started to identify a demand for more hiking and start to work to build partnerships and identify potential routes across both Fillmore and Houston counties. And then in 2020, as we all know, COVID put quite a bit on the back burner. This project was no exception. And at that time, Marty actually ended up transitioning away from his job at he started transitioning away from his job at CETA. And because of that, the project was no longer associated with his previous role. And so in the fall of 2021, he reintroduced the idea privately to the partners and the folks that he had been in communication with back in 2018 and 2019 to start working towards this trail in a private way. In 2022, we started seeing a lot of positive support in the local and backpacking communities down here in our counties. And that motivated the organization to actually form as a formal nonprofit organization. And at this time, Marty and a board member started to do a test hike as well, just to see what it would be like to actually backpack through the region. In 2023, we got our official status as a nonprofit organization. And we started to get increasing press as well, including Minnesota Public Radio. And we applied for our LCCMR funding, which is the Environment Natural Resources Trust Fund that I had mentioned previously. And then in 2024, we started our work with the DNR. I will share a lot more about that later on in the presentation. And we were awarded funding from LCCMR, and the organization hired myself to lead the project forward. So when this project started, Marty was looking over maps of the region and just trying to identify what types of recreational opportunities do we actually have down here in Fillmore and Houston County. So on this map here, you'll notice the addition of those yellow circles. Those are town halls. And all of the polygons that are on the screen now represent public land. The light green represents state forests, and the dark green represents state parks. And the yellow represents wilderness management areas. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment to just give some information about WMAs. So those are funded on the excise tax for hunting and fishing goods. And because of the rules that they have associated with WMAs, we know that we are not able to build trails in those WMAs, and instead we'll have to go around them. But it's given us a really great opportunity to connect with the largest recreational users that we have in our area, which are hunters. We know that hunters are concerned about sharing trails and wanting to make sure that they stay safe and that the folks around them recreating stay safe as well. And so knowing that we can't build trail through WMAs, we've been using that as an opportunity to further connect with the hunting community in our area so that we can really understand their thoughts, ideas, concerns as it relates back to the trail project. And then here on this final map, you'll notice the addition of some black and orange lines. Those orange lines represent dirt trails, and the black lines represent paved trails. I had mentioned the Lost Creek Hiking Trail over in Chatfield, so the far left of the screen, that's that trail. And then I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Root River Trail, which goes through Lanesboro and Wayland, so that's right there in the center of the screen. And so as Marty is doing his outreach and starting to do some of his research, as he's looking at these maps, he's really seeing this kind of general pattern, which you might be able to even see on the screen. There's a lot of access to outdoor spaces in this region, but there isn't connections to help you get from, let's say, Chatfield all the way down to Reno. But if you're looking across the screen, you can kind of see this general kind of swoop across the screen where there's a lot of public land available that folks could recreate in individually. So out of all of that, we developed our proposed trail corridor. And this map was actually built by an early supporter of ours. He's a trout angler out of the Winona area, and he's also a professional mapper. So he's built a lot of our more professional maps that you might see. And as I mentioned, so of course, a part of the reason why we chose this proposed corridor is because of the access to recreation. It captures a lot of the state parks and forests that we have in our area, as well as some existing trail systems. But secondarily, it also allows us to have some safety concerns in mind too. So we have a lot of highways in our area, and we know that in order to support hikers in crossing the highways safely, we need to bring them into town where it's safest to cross. And as we've been doing our outreach, we've been hearing from businesses that they really understand the potential economic benefit that this trail poses for their businesses and their communities. We all know that hikers they're really good at walking, but they're also really good at eating. And so having them walk right through the downtown areas of Chatfield and Caledonia and Wayland will bring them closer to resources where they will buy food and resupply and even potentially secure some lodging to stay in town for an evening. So one question that we're often asked about is, what does a backpacking trail actually look like? So our goal is to create a backcountry experience. We want the trail to really blend into the landscape, but be easy to find if you're looking for it. So this picture is a kind of a great representation of what we're thinking. If you're on the trail, you know where to find it. You see the path right in front of you. You might feel like it's a more backcountry or wilderness experience. You're not seeing a lot of signs of life outside of the trail. But let's say you're 30 feet off to the side on a road and you're driving. You might not necessarily know that the trail is there unless you know how to find it or you're aware of the project. We do know. Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope you guys can't hear my dogs, but they're barking very loudly right now. We do know that there will be wet crossings in our trail system. Part of that is that it saves us on the manual labor and the money that it will cost to build bridges to cross some of the streams and rivers that we have down here. But it also is giving us an opportunity to work with groups like Trout Unlimited and other conservation groups to ensure that we're adding protections for trout populations in the streams as well. So I'd mentioned previously we've been working with U of M Extension and sharing. They've been able to support us in providing some expertise that we didn't have on our team. And one of those things that they've supported us on is the build standards and guidelines for our trail. So these were developed by a man named Mel Bauman. He's a retired professor of forestry at the U of M. And he has built standards and guidelines for other major trail systems, including Wisconsin's Ice Age Trail. So we were really excited to have his expertise in supporting us in developing out these standards as well. So for our standards in wooded areas, we call for a 24 to 30-inch tread with a 4 to 5 foot clearing width and an 8-foot clearing height. And that height is really because backpackers will have these giant backpacks on them that often extend above their head. And we want to make sure that as hikers are walking down the trail, they're not having things snagging on their equipment and preventing them from moving forward. Outside of the wooded areas, our standards call for a 30-inch mowed path in grass and an obstruction-free on logging roads or shared trails, as well as very narrow access where we're trying to protect against motorized vehicles because, again, this is a long-distance hiking and backpacking trail. We're really trying to make sure that there's not too much motorized access on the trail unless it fits in with a very specific area or a trail system already has that motorized access included. So all of that means that the trail might look like this. It might look like this. It also might look like this. And this photo is actually from that 2022 test hike. And I believe this photo is taken down in the Lanesboro area. It also might look like this. As I mentioned, we know that we have to bring folks into the downtown areas to be able to cross those highways safely. So literally walking through the downtown areas is something we very much envision for our trail. And it also might look like this, or it might look like this. And I'm going to pause on these last two photos. So we live in a working agricultural landscape, and we really want to make sure that we do not hide what's here. So that means inviting hikers to hike in cornfields or hike through farm gates and really experience what it's like to live, work, and recreate in this region. We do know that early on, we're probably going to have a lot of roadwalks, especially as we're working to gain more support from private landowners to add trail onto their lands, and as we continue to work with the DNR to secure access agreements for the state parks and forests in our region. But as we start to knock off larger priority areas, we do hope to reroute trail onto more traditional pathways. So all of this means that the trail will ideally cross state, private, and local government land. You can see on the table on the right-hand side, we have a little bit of an understanding here of where the land will actually, what the breakdown of the land will be. So early on in the next year or two, we're hoping about 30% of the trail will be on state land. And all of that is being accomplished with our work with the DNR. They're currently looking at the parcels the priority parcels that we have identified to see where within those parcels are there existing trails that we can designate as MDHT trail. We also know in the beginning there will be a lot of roadblocks, as I mentioned earlier. So it'll be about 60% of the trail within the next year or two, just helping to connect the sections of trail that we do have complete to other sections as well. And then early on, that private and local land will remain pretty small, just at 5%, as we're starting to work with landowners to build those access agreements. And then within the next 10 years, we hope to increase the amount of state and private land so that we can decrease those public roadwalks. We do know that local land will always remain at about 5%, just because there's only so much local government land available for us to build trail on or to designate trail. We are really lucky here in the state of Minnesota that there are really strong protections for landowners who choose to open up access to recreation on their land free of charge. And we've been working to ensure that we can really support landowners in understanding the Minnesota statute and how it protects them as they consider signing on to this project. So here again is that proposed trail corridor. And I will say, if you're interested in looking at this even further, it is all over our website, all over our social media. So if you were to search our name, Minnesota Driftless Hiking Trail, you should be able to find that trail corridor fairly easily. Often when I show this to people, they're a little confused because it's quite a large distance. So that width of that trail corridor is about 10 miles wide. We want to make sure that folks understand we are only working with willing landowners. And so where the trail ultimately goes depends on where we're granted access. So as we continue to work with landowners and identify potential routes, we'll get a clearer picture of where the trail will actually be located more specifically. But right now, this is the corridor that we're operating within. So I mentioned we've received some pretty substantial funding support within the last year. That started with the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources. That funding comes from the lottery proceeds, and we received $425,000 to use for the next 3 years. That funding allowed the organization to hire myself as the trail director, and it also is supporting us in buying all of the equipment that we need to build and designate trail within the next couple years. It'll also support us in working with trail consultants. And so when we're actually getting down to building new trail, we have folks with expertise who can help show us where we should be laying that trail and how we should be building it. We've also been working with U of M Extension on their Empowering Small Minnesota Community Grant Program. That funding is via the legislator, and it allowed us for that expertise sharing specifically with the MAP standards and trail design guidelines. But they've also been supporting us in hosting community input sessions or listening sessions along our trail corridor. We hosted one in Chatfield in December and another in Caledonia last Monday, and we have a third one coming up in Wayland at the end of April. And these listening sessions have been really important for us because they give us an opportunity to connect face-to-face with folks who live in the trail corridor so that we can hear from them what their concerns, their interests, their feedback is about the trail project as a whole, and really position ourselves to be a resource for the communities that we pass through and build this trail in collaboration with the communities that the trail passes through. So we're always asked about trail amenities. Two amenities that we know that we will have to work to provide are campgrounds and trailheads. In our region, we do have some public campgrounds, and it's a priority of ours to route the trail as close as possible to these areas. And we also have in the state forest, we're allowed to disperse camp away from established amenities as well. We've also been working with private campgrounds or short-term rental hosts with this kind of goal of building this mutually beneficial relationship of bringing our hikers closer to their businesses so that they can gain new customers and so that backpackers who are enjoying the Minnesota Driftless Trail have a place to pitch their tent. And we've actually been seeing that this has been sort of a point of encouragement for landowners who are considering signing on to our project. We actually currently have one landowner who has signed a letter of intent with us, and one of her largest motivations to being involved with the project is that she has dispersed camping and small cabins and tiny homes on her property. And so having the trail cross very close by those businesses will help support her businesses too, and again, support hikers on our trail and having a place to camp for the evening. As far as trailheads go, all of our trailheads will provide parking, trail information, and emergency reference points. It's our goal to integrate these into rural landmarks and town parks as much as possible, again, because we really want to highlight what's already here. And we want folks to really understand what it feels like to live, to work, and to recreate in these regions. Long term, though, we do recognize that we may need to acquire more land so that we can build proper trailheads for folks to utilize too. So being a landowner starts with the process of becoming a landowner for the trail starts with an initial discussion and exploration. During that time, our goal is to really understand the desires and the goals of the landowner and how those might relate to the larger project that we're trying to accomplish too. If the landowner, after that discussion, is interested in signing on to the project or continuing to pursue talking about the project, we ask that they sign a good faith letter of intent. Now, these letters are not a firm commitment. It doesn't say, that sets you in stone that we're going to put that trail on your land. Rather, it just says, I'm willing to continue conversations to explore the possibility of having this trail across my land. From there, we would move on to site visits and mapping, and then work to establish the long-term access agreements that would actually be that firm commitment and allow us to go in later to build or designate the trail. Then we get to the trail building and designation, followed by public access. On the right-hand side of the screen here, you'll see a picture of a trail sign. So this one is on the Lost Creek Hiking Trail, and it's a great example of the types of trail signs that we envision adding to private landowners' land based on whatever the needs are of that landowner. So this one is on the Bailey Brothers cattle pasture. It's a part of the Lost Creek Hiking Trail. And because it's an active cattle pasture, it just provides information for hikers to keep them safe, but also to protect the livestock on the property. And so as we're working with landowners, these are the types of things that we're trying to understand about especially if they have a working agricultural land, what do they use that land for, and how can we bring hikers onto the land safely and ensure that their business is still protected. So there are a lot of benefits to being a landowner for our project or on our project. First and foremost is you may gain property access for logging, hunting, fishing, or other things that you do on your property. Let's say you have a stream on your property that you don't currently have a designated trail to get down to and you like to go down there to fish. If we can build the trail that passes down through that stream or towards that stream, that's then access for the landowner to utilize as well for their own recreational purposes. We also expect that this trail will help reduce the risk of trespassing and poaching in our region. And this is actually informed by the Lost Creek Hiking Trail. The Lost Creek Hiking Trail has a number of private landowners who, prior to signing on to the project, had said, we have a lot of trespassers and poachers that we find on our land, and it's kind of a constant issue that we're dealing with. And then after the Lost Creek Hiking Trail came to be, they noticed a reduction in trespassing and poaching because folks are way less likely to go somewhere illegally when they know that folks are recreating legally there. So we hope that that can kind of serve as an example of the potential to reduce more trespassing and poaching across the region too. It'll also protect the rural and remote characteristics of the land and support quality of life. We know that we need people to move to our rural communities in order for them to survive. And a major reason why people choose to move to these communities is the access to the outdoors. So if we don't want a ton of government-owned land and we want people to move to these communities, sharing a little piece of our private property is a great compromise to help make that happen. And then across the board, the entire time, the landowner maintains the ownership, hunting access, and the working landscape of their land. Unless they directly donate the land to us, MDHT does not own the land. Rather, we're just being granted access to build a trail and allow others to hike on that trail too. So I wanted to provide a little bit of a loose timeline now of what's ahead of us. In the next year to 2 years, we are going to continue to work on designating trails and existing routes within the DNR, local trails, and with private landowners who have already signed letters of intent, as well as those in-town routes. All of that work is happening right now. We got a call from the DNR last week about some progress that they've made, and we're hoping in the next couple weeks that they'll be able to provide us with those priority areas and the trail systems that they're suggesting we designate, so we can look at them with our larger map and see where do they kind of fit in with the larger picture of what we are hoping to do. The local trails I mentioned, we have a mediation session coming up at the Lost Creek Hiking Trail to explore the possibility of partnering together. And we're starting to work with some private landowners as well who already have trail on their land and are interested in designating their trail as a part of the MDHT route too. And we've started conversations with some of the towns in our trail corridor, particularly Chatfield and Caledonia and Wayland, to see about designating the in-town routes too. At this time, it's going to be mostly designation work, but there may be some minor trail building that we end up needing to do or some clearing work as well. We'll also identify the roadwalks at this time. And within the next year or two, we expect that it'll be mostly discrete sections of trail. So a little bit harder to find if you're not really tapped into the project or you're not as familiar with the area, but we'll have some areas that you could get out and actually experience some trail. In the next 2 to 5 years, our goal is to start working with more private landowners within our focus area. And at that time, that might mean that we're going to actually build new trail to create that longer continuous footpath and connect the sections of trail that we had designated in the years previously. We'll also start to make improvements to long-term roadwalks. And at this time, we expect that there will be several grouped sections of trails that folks can enjoy. But it will still be another 5 to 10 years out before the trail is functionally complete. In that time period, we expect that we'll continue to work with landowners to close those longer gaps, as well as create reroutes on original trail just based on the use patterns and start to improve some trail amenities as needed. At this time, we'll also consider some extensions if there's areas that maybe deserve a spur trail to highlight a unique feature in that area. And at that time, as I said, functionally complete. For us, that means that somebody could drive down to Chatfield, Minnesota, park their car, put their backpack on, and hike all the way to the river without us ever needing to know about it, because they're able to get all the information that they need online and the trail's well blazed, and they can figure their way out, just as every trail organization has established for their trails as well. So our next steps right now are to finish our community listening sessions. As I mentioned, we have one more in Wayland at the end of April. We also are working to finalize those agreements with the DNR, which we hope will happen sometime around the beginning of summer, maybe the midsummer at the latest. We'll also start building out our focus areas as per the LCCMR grant, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And we'll begin the private landowner extensions more earnestly. Begin is a little misleading. We have been doing this work already over the last couple years, and to date we have about 15 landowners who've signed on to be a part of this project, and a handful more who have expressed interest in becoming a part of the project as well. And then we'll also start working with county officials to start figuring out where's the safest place for us to have those roadwalk sections and make sure we're not missing anything important as we start to work towards understanding the roadwalk areas as well. So for our focus areas, the LCCMR grant required us to choose 2 focus areas to really build out our work. And so the first area is here in Lanesboro. This area is where the test hike was done back in 2022. And it's actually where most of the landowners who are signed on to the project reside as well. We just need a handful more of landowners to be able to create a continuous footpath here, but more would definitely be better as it gives us more opportunities for developing a path that really takes into account the landscape and the larger trail as a whole. This section here on the right over Caledonia is our second focus area. In this region, we would need about half a dozen landowners to be able to create a continuous footpath. That would represent a very significant decrease in roadwalks because this area of the map is actually where we have the most roadwalks in our trail system. Both areas end up being about 25 miles each for a total of 50. So it is our hope that we potentially would have around 50 miles of hiking trails, not necessarily connected, but at least available by the end of this year, so that moving into year 2 and 3 of our grant program, we can start to connect those to create that longer footpath too. And we do think that as we get folks to sign on to the project and we start to build and designate trail, landowners that are in between each of these sections might be more encouraged to sign on to the project as well. So if you're feeling inspired today and you're interested in getting more involved, there's a handful of ways that you can get tapped into the work that we're doing. First and foremost is helping raise awareness. So I think in the next 4 weeks, I have 12 public speaking engagements. And I don't know if I fooled all of you, but public speaking is certainly not my favorite thing. So I'm always really happy when folks are willing to share more about our project with other people across the state. It really helps to spread the word about our project. And I will say too, we really want to hear from everybody about this project. We want to hear from folks who are excited about it and want to see it happen, folks who just need to learn more because they're not quite sure, as well as people who are opposed to the project, because it gives us some good insights into what are the concerns about having this trail down here, and how can we work with the communities to continue building that local support and ensure we're building it in partnership with the communities as well. You can also consider land access. If you live down in Fillmore, Houston County, getting connected with us to discuss the potential of having the trail across your land would be fantastic. We'd love to connect and talk. My contact information will be on the last slide, and the best way to do that is to just send me an email and we can find a time to connect and talk a little bit more. Donations and merchandise. So we are a 501c3 now. Profit. I know I threw out that very large number of $425,000, but all of that grant money is tied up to very specific purposes and does not cover the more generalized operational expenses that we have as a nonprofit. So we are always actively fundraising to ensure that we can raise funds to create some sustainability and longevity for our organization, especially as we work through that grant funding. And then we also sell merchandise on our website. I will say, so right now it's March. We're hoping to have some new merchandise up on our website in May. So some of that stuff is a little bit on the older side, but we'll be updating it pretty soon. So if you like to wear trail swag, we encourage you to keep an eye on our trail shop as well. And then volunteering. There's a lot of ways to get involved as a volunteer in our organization. Mapping is actually happening currently. We have a handful of volunteers who every time they go out for a hike, they turn on their GPS, they'll track the route that they do, and then they'll send it to us so that we can add it to our larger mapping system. And it helps us to see where are people hiking in our region and does it make sense for those trails to become a part of ours, especially if they're already within the DNR parcels that we've been talking about, or talking to the DNR about, or the local trail systems where we've been communicating with the local governments about those trails too. Clearing and signage is work that we anticipate will be coming up soon, especially as we're starting to designate trail. We anticipate that we'll have to do a lot of signage and clearing of the trails. And if you like to get your hands dirty and be outside, that'd be a great opportunity to get involved with us as well. And then we've also been starting to host more events. Right now, they've been primarily just these listening sessions as well as presentations, but starting in the summertime, we'll be hosting more workshops as well as guided hikes and opportunities like that to bring folks in the community together and to share more about our project. And so if you like to be outside and you would like to get involved in an event, that's a great way to support us as well. And then as a nonprofit, we do have a board of directors. We are specifically looking for locals. People often say that you aren't local here until your grandparents are buried in the cemetery. And those are the types of folks that we're looking to add to our board of directors right now. Right now, we have about 9 members on our board. A lot of them live all of them live in or near the trail corridor and have been really passionately supporting this project from the very beginning. But we know nonprofits will often have turnover in boards, so we're always looking to recruit and bring on more folks too. And then I'll also say one that's not actually on this list, but if you want to just get more general updates, we do have a newsletter that we send out every the first Tuesday of every month. And that's a great way to stay involved with the latest updates, the latest events and happenings, volunteer opportunities, and everything else in between. So if you head to our website and over to our Contact Us page, you can sign up to volunteer there. And then there's a link to our newsletter there as well. And you can find us online. We are active on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at HikeMN Driftless. Our website's listed right there. And as promised, there's my email address that does go directly to me. And I would love to get connected with you guys if you are interested in just hearing more. Maybe you have a group that you think would be interested in having a presentation, or you just want to talk about the project more largely. I would love to connect. Please feel free to reach out to me. And if you, again, are feeling inspired and you'd like to support our work, you can Venmo a donation to us at HikeMN Driftless. And again, because we're a nonprofit, all donations are tax exempt. And that is all I have. I believe, let me stop my screen here. I believe we have time for questions if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask.
I guess I'll ask a question with the percentage of private land and state land and those types of things. Is that a pretty common breakdown of some of those other trails you mentioned for public versus private?
Yeah, so I don't have a great answer for this because I don't know exactly the percentage. But I did look into this yesterday, and the Ice Age Trail, which has been around since the 1950s. Oh, let me think for a second. No, I'm sorry. So the Superior Hiking Trail, they have 80 private landowners on their trail system. The Ice Age Trail also crosses a good percentage of private landowners. I'm just not sure of the comparison to state or local government owned land. But it is common for trail organizations to pass through private land. And so we have been working closely with the Superior Hiking Trail and the North Country Trail Association from the beginning of this project to understand their process of talking with landowners and really informing them of the Minnesota statutes and how that protects them to build that support and that excitement about becoming a part of the project.
A lot of the creeks and rivers have fishing easements. Do those do you any good? Because some of those might form decent corridors, although you have to stay close to the river on those easements.
Yeah, I that's still something on my list to look into and understand a little bit further. I will say we've just started getting in contact with Trout Unlimited, and we're going to be connecting about giving a presentation in the next month. And there's also somebody from Trout Unlimited who's writing an article about us to help spread awareness in their population. So we're hoping to start talking with them about those easements, about how that actually works, and if there's a potential of designating some of those routes. But right now, I don't have a great answer for you on that. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm active in Trout Unlimited. The easements are actually owned by the DNR, so that may be your better contact. As far as I know, all of those easements are DNR easements for fishing access. Now, whether or not that'll give you trail access, I'm not sure. They're worth looking at. I fish a lot down there, and that's why I know the area. Just one recommendation is and you probably already know, the Gribbon Creek Valley
Mhm.
south of Wayland is an excellent way to connect to the South Fork of the Root watershed to jump from the North Fork to the South Fork and get you closer to the Mississippi. I love that Gribbon Creek Valley. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful area. Thank you for mentioning that. That is actually an area on our trail corridor that we've been looking at. And I know for the DNR, some the priority areas they're looking at first are actually some like logging roads and maintenance access roads, and not so much the trail systems that folks are already using. But we do plan to see and continue to expand that as we work to increase the amount of state trail that we have in our trail.
And just another one word of warning, I've been on a lot of foot trails along creeks, especially down there, that are designated non-motorized, that are abused by ATVs right and left.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get around to regulating that with the limited core the DNR has, but ATV abuse in that part of the state is just horrible, in my opinion.
All right. Does anybody have any more questions for Alexa? I don't see anything in the chat. That was a great presentation. Thank you very much for that. It was very, very informative, not something a lot of us are overly familiar with. So I have a friend that did the Pacific Coast Trail, and I was just flabbergasted at how that all worked for him. So it's neat to have something close to home that's similar.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. I love backpacking, clearly, and so it's really fun for me to be able to talk to audiences about this and just to continue to get the word out. And again, if you have any questions at any point in time or you want to connect for any other purpose, I'm more than happy to connect with you all further. I'll put my email in the chat just in case you want to grab it, and feel free to send me a message.
Sounds great. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.